All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of How I Built This, Birmingham style. We talk to entrepreneurs all over Birmingham, learn a little bit about their history and how things went during those early days, and hopefully how they're going today and all those high growth, successful days. I'm Ron, CEO and founder of Two Maids and a Mop, and also proud founder of a new brand, a new home service brand called Pink Zebra Moving. And today we have Forrest Walden. So Forrest, I've known Forrest now for several years. He and I are in a very similar industry in the franchising world, completely two different consumer industries, but franchising, whether you sell food or cleaning services, they're all very similar. And so we've had a chance to interact, and I know his story, and it's a very inspiring, fun, I think even educational story for a lot of people. Forrest's story dates back to when he was in a fitness franchise. He actually was a master franchisee with 55 locations throughout the Southeast. We'll talk about master franchising and what that means here in a minute. And eventually he sold that to the corporate office at Fitness Together and decided to pursue his passion in fitness and start his own fitness brand that is now called Iron Tribe. And it's obviously been a very popular brand here locally in the Birmingham area, and it's scaled beyond the borders of Birmingham as well. So Forrest, welcome to the podcast today.
Ron, thanks for having me on. Excited to talk to you about a local Birmingham success story.
That's right. So let's go back to those early days, even before Iron Tribe. And I'd love to know a little bit about what you learned even building that. That sounds like an organization, pretty large organization all by itself. 55 franchises is no small feat. So talk to us about what you experienced there, and then what was the motivation to leave that brand to start your own?
Yeah, so if we really want to go back, we go back to Auburn, to a guy who all he knew how to do was work out. That's what I enjoyed. That's what I loved. I was a cheerleader at Auburn, really to get a scholarship just to work out all day. I had an exercise science degree. No one could tell me what to do with it other than hospital wellness and corporate rehab that sounded like the death of my life. I stumbled into personal training on accident, figured out you could make really good money at it. So at 23 years old, I had a couple years under my belt. I was making about $55,000, $60,000 a year in 1998. But I also realized at that young age that I was trading time for money. I read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it was the first time I had read something that was not written by Arnold or one of his contemporaries. And I fell in love. I was like, oh my God, I'll never get rich trading time for money, no matter how much I charge. I mean, that was like an epiphany for me, light bulbs. And so I started thinking about scale. And I thought, well, I've got to open my own business, but I was paralyzed by what I didn't know. I mean, paralyzed. Do I charge memberships? Do I only charge personal training? How do you negotiate a lease? I mean, I knew nothing. I was a fitness guy. So I stumbled across a franchise opportunity in Denver, Colorado called Fitness Together. I didn't know anybody was franchising in that space. Quick segue, my stepdad is a very successful franchisor of Express Oil Change, which has now merged with, what's that? Anyway, he did a merger and then a sale.
Yeah.
Just on. So I knew all about franchising. I've been watching it my whole life. And I was like, wow, okay, someone who knows all the systems, I can just bring the love for the product. And so I flew out there, loved what I saw, opened the first one in the Southeast at 23 years old. I just turned 24. That was 2001. And there was not much personal training going on in Birmingham, Alabama in 2001. We were on the bleeding edge. People thought it's for people in California. They thought it was for the rich. They thought it was for the famous. And I was like, oh, it's for everyday people. So it was a little bit of a slow start. But we grew rapidly till eventually I owned and operated 6 Fitness Together studios here in Birmingham. And then I bought the rights to Alabama, grew that to 15 here in Alabama, and then loved what was happening, loved the growth opportunity, bought the rights to North Carolina and Florida, sold my existing stores, and ended up just traveling those 3 states, eventually growing that territory to 55 locations.
Wow. I mean, that's a book by itself, right?
Yeah. It was a wild ride. I remember I had this moment where I realized I was paying more in taxes than I ever expected to make in a year in my life. And that's because I am not a vintage entrepreneur. I did not start out with this burning desire to be an entrepreneur. I fell into it just chasing my passion. And I'll never forget when I bought that first location, that first Fitness Together, the CEO of that company, Rick Sikorsky, great mentor in my life, he handed me the book, The E-Myth, Revisited, Why Most Small Businesses Don't Work and What to Do About It. He said, Forrest, you are no longer the personal trainer. You are now the marketer and salesman of personal training, and never underestimate the difference. And that's a book I still try to revisit. It's sitting right over here on my desk. I still try to revisit it once a year because it's foundational to a franchise mindset of scaling yourself. But for me to think about not being the product, that was a huge leap for me. And I did everything wrong. I can remember trying to hand off my clients to my new staff who were undertrained and I didn't know how to hire, and tiptoeing out of the room and listening through the wall. Okay, laughing, it's going to be okay. I lost every one of those clients because I didn't know how to scale. So anyway, I did everything wrong. But eventually what I learned is I love the marketing and the sales and the team building, all the parts of business, just as much as I love teaching someone how to get biceps and abs. And the fact that I can do it in the industry that I love, like that's a sweet spot, because what I learned, at 23, Ron, you can only tell someone to supinate their wrist at the top of a bicep curl so many times before you start to question your life. Like, am I going to be 60 years old telling people these same points? So right. I get to be involved, but I really get to think about scale and growth and in an industry. So anyway, I'm getting off topic. Why did I change? 2007, 2008. Anybody who was in business during that time knows what happened. Just the floor fell out, the Great Recession. We were in a high ticket business. We were individual rooms, suites, private personal training. You're going to drop $700 to $900 a month. That's a luxury car payment. That might even be a mortgage payment. And someone's doing the vintage legal pad test of what do we need to cut, honey? At the very top of that list is personal training. And so I saw that business just contract. And I also realized when I was traveling and visiting my stores, I didn't think we were generating the results we should for the service we were charging for. And I remember I had this moment where I would visit these stores every quarter and I would challenge them because they had no testimonials, no raving fans of their own. And so when I was trying to help them build their marketing plans, I said, you need local people in your area that you've changed their life. So people believe you got the goods. They recognize a customer in your area. And I say, for now, borrow mine from Birmingham. Here, same brand. There's no, that's no issue there. But you need your own. And I'd come back a quarter later, no testimonials. I'd come back a quarter later and I'm like, what is wrong with this model? So anyway, I'd had some friends come over and work out with me in my garage. I had never really been into group fitness. I'd always been into one-on-one, but I got exposed to the power of camaraderie and healthy competition and doing it with friends in a group. And I just knew, like, this is the future of fitness. Like, this is so much more fun. Everybody's getting results. The competition takes someone who's not even competitive to all of a sudden caring about their 5K and their deadlift. And so anyway, I knew it was the future. The only thing I couldn't figure out is how do I get out of my no compete?
Right.
And so I knew that my corporate office wanted my territory back. Like, they were trying to buy all the master franchisees' territory back. And so I just called a meeting with my CEO and Ricky, my stepdad, he said, look, Forrest, just tell him what you want and do it. Don't send an email. Don't, try to sneak or just sit down with him. Fantastic advice. And so I sat down with him and I said, look, here's where I am. I want to do this group thing. It has nothing to do with one-on-one training. Man, we're going to flip tires and we're going to do all this stuff. And I know you want my territory back. So I'll sell you my territory back if you waive my no compete. We made that deal. And within a few months, I had opened the first location in Homewood, not far from where we're sitting right now. And it was off to the races.
I bet that felt great.
Man,
what did you do the night after the deal was made? Did you celebrate or did you just move on to the next project?
I was at a conference. I was at a fitness conference. And I remember I just have this vivid, I was standing in the line to use the porta potty because there was tons of people there. And I got a call saying the deal had been done. And I remember looking around at all these trainers were at this conference that I was going to, and it was all about group fitness. And I said, look, I just remember telling myself, Forrest, there's no one in this room who has the experience that you've had, who now has the capital you have to take this model and grow it in this space. And so I wanted to franchise from the very beginning, had big goals with that. But yeah, it felt fantastic. I remember, so back to E-Myth, when we opened, the first 3 months I coached. I was on the floor, not coached in years. Then I moved myself into management, and then I hadn't been in the gym since. But I wanted to make sure I really understood what we were building. And I remember in those 3 months, I'm like, I don't want to do this long, but man, I feel alive doing this. Like, this is what I was created to do.
The startup days are fun. You know, there's tons of stress. You don't sleep a lot. But man, you feel more alive during startup phase than you ever do when you've got the multi-million-dollar brand, you know, across the country. And we're both speaking from that point of, you know, perspective. We're actually in the middle of ramping up a second home service brand, Pink Zebra Moving. And it takes me back to those early days with two maids and a mop and all the crazy, you know, you live through all these things and you're like, man, if I were to do this over again, this is what I would do. You know what? We're still making mistakes. There's no way to know everything, you know, so that's probably a good tidbit for everyone. You know, you're never going to be perfect. I don't care how much capital you have. I don't care how much experience you have. You're always going to make some mistakes. But the great thing about mistakes is you can always learn from them, you know, so that's what I'm learning here at Pink Zebra is that, yeah, we're going to make a few, but man, that's growth, that's discovery, you know, and that to me is the exciting part. I love failure in a weird way, you know, so let's talk about Iron Tribe. And, you know, those early days, you said you were a coach, you worked out a garage. Obviously it's grown to be much bigger than that. You know, so talk to us about those very early days. And if there's any fun struggles that you want to share with us, please do, because everybody wants to hear about those things that didn't go right. You know, everything from the outside looking in looks like it's all perfect. So if there's any things you want to expose about those early days so people can learn from that, feel free.
Man, we could spend the whole time talking about what didn't go right and the lessons I've learned and the pits I've been in. And I will talk about one in particular. But in the early days, I remember when I signed the lease let me back up a little bit. When I was trying to make a decision of whether I wanted to sell my territory back and start over, that was like an 18-month process. It's easy to skip over it now, but I was off all leases. I had no debt. I had virtually passive income because I was making an override on all the, why did I leave? That's amazing. But I was bored. I was freaking bored. And I remember I was at PF Chang's with my wife and I was going on and on about, I want to start over, but and she's like, would you just do it already? You will make it successful. I'm sick of hearing about it. And I was like, but babe, you know, that's back to being on leases and back to being that. She's like, you'll figure it out. So that's what I needed. I needed a release from my wife. But I remember signing that first lease. I woke up at like 2 a.m. Couldn't go back to sleep. I started running and I ran right by the location I just signed a lease on. And I was like, all right, you know, like, here I'm starting over. But you know, that's the feeling we love, like laying it on the line. I had that experience last year with COVID. I'll talk about that. But where was I going with that? I'm getting off track. So anyway,
you're running at 2 o'clock in the morning. So.
Well, yeah, I know, but I was kind of I was setting the stage for. It was explosive, but it was not without trepidation. I think is what I was trying to say. It wasn't just like, you know, there was a little bit of like, are you sure you want to do this? You've already proven yourself. You kind of have it easy, but I was bored. So started over. Dude, we came out like a rocket ship. We blew my pro forma away. We opened a second one within a year. We opened 2 more within 2 years. We franchised within 2.5 years. So on April 15th, 2012, we had been open 26 months. I just opened my 4th location over in Mountain Brook, and the FDD was done, and I put the model out for franchising. I mean, it was a rocket ship.
And Forrest, real quick before you move on, you and I, when we say FDD, we get it, you know. But anyone listening, FDD is like this franchise term, franchise disclosure document. In the old days, I think they called it.
You fuck.
Yeah, there you go. And so it's basically this 100-page prospectus on the franchise opportunity itself, the investment opportunity. So for anyone that doesn't know our lingo, there you go.
It's the most one-sided legal document in the history of the world, but
it is. It absolutely is.
And so we were blowing and going. We won a big award that year for Ultimate Market of the Year from our CRM company, Infusionsoft. They put us on stage. We started speaking to entrepreneurs. They flew us to New York and put our story on the big outdoor TV in the middle of Times Square.
So
I mean,
cool.
dude, it was like, are you kidding me? And we started selling franchises like gangbusters. I think we sold 27 in the first year, and then it just grew from there. So it was an amazing start. That can lead into the struggles, unless you want to talk any more about the early go-go years.
Yeah, well, so all that scale, all that success that came with the scale, sometimes when we think about building this business, everybody's got an idea and they put the idea on paper and they go, let's go. And their thought, everyone's thought that builds the business is there will be growth. And most people think that growth, any growth is good. Like, in fact, faster growth, better. Was fast growth what you wanted? I know from my perspective that sometimes too fast of growth has created problems I didn't see coming, and so what was your perspective during those early growth days?
So I knew from my Fitness Together days that investors don't get excited about one location. They want to see scale. They want to see the opportunity to create significant income, and trying to get someone with good net worth and the savvy that I wanted in franchisees to only show them the proof of one location, I knew wouldn't attract the right avatar. So my goal was show that it can be replicated, show what it looks like when you take over a city, and then have the item 19, which is your financial disclosures, to back it up and saying, all right, here's what we're doing. So that was my goal, was to build it out, own Birmingham, never franchise Birmingham, and then sell that model to other locations. So like my guy in Nashville has 5 locations. My guy in Memphis has 3 locations, that type of thing. But I will say where the wheels started to come off is if I were to do something different today, I would have stopped with that 4th gym for a while, because when you launch a franchise business, that is a 100% completely different business than the business of me owning and operating my 4 gyms. And even though I had been a franchisee and a master franchisee, I didn't really truly respect that was 100% different businesses. And to the extent that I'm understaffed in my corporate stores or trying to get people to wear multiple hats to run both businesses, I'm really putting a lid on what we can do. So I opened 2 more stores in Birmingham, both in Hoover. And one struggled for years. One I had to close because, man, we're blowing and going franchising. And I thought we had it licked and we knew how to operate stores. And, you're never guaranteed anything. You got to show up every day and execute your own model. So, yeah, the goal was fast growth, but it also led to some even more problems down the road on the other side of the franchise.
Well, obviously it's worked out. So talk to us about where you are today. Like we'll get to some real fun questions here in a minute, but I'd love for, everyone to see what type of success has come from, even though you had some stumbles early on, we all do. It's worked out. Things are still rocking and rolling, and you're doing great. The brand, when I reach across the franchise network and I talk to people about Birmingham being our corporate headquarters, they almost always say, hey, do you know Forrest at Iron Tribe? So it's well respected within the franchise community as well. So yeah, tell us a little bit about where you are and where you want to go, and we'll talk about some fun questions after that.
Yeah, currently we own and operate 5 here in Birmingham because I shut one down. COVID, we could do a whole podcast on what we had to do over COVID. We pivoted our entire brand. I doubled down again. I changed my model. Literally got off a client webinar and said to myself, I either just, completely changed and saved my business, or I killed it. Probably no middle ground. But again, you feel alive as an entrepreneur when you're making those kind of decisions. It's been amazing. It's been a great payoff. We're on a good trajectory after a terrible year. But we've got 29 franchisees on top of our 5, 34 total. But I do want to get to real quickly, one of the fundamental mistakes we made is in the avatar we sold to as franchisees, because they were 95% Birmingham-based business owners. But they checked all the boxes for me. They'd owned and led a business. They resonated with our core values. They were brand zealots. They had an amazing experience. But here's the problem. They lived in Birmingham. They owned their business in Birmingham, and they thought my model was going to be mailbox money. And so I ended up with virtually all off-site owners who Iron Tribe was kind of out of sight, out of mind. Hey, Forrest, help me hire someone to run the gym. And we were throwing 26, 28-year-old kids in there to not only execute the model, but man, pay QuickBooks and market and all this stuff that never intended an owner to delegate. So we've had a lot of closures, and I've had to close one of my own. And man, there was a point about 3.5 years ago where I completely lost my swagger. I lost my confidence. I really was questioning the model. Could we continue to replicate it? It was getting harder to market and acquire a customer. My space is super saturated. The landscape looks way different than it did in 2010. I was looking at declining sales trends, and I went into full-blown depression. I quit sleeping. It was the worst probably 6 months of my entire life. And that's a whole other podcast. I've done a podcast on that journey. If that's resonating with anybody, Tribecast is my podcast. I've done a whole hour on that journey, what God taught me, how I came out of it. There's barely a week go by, Ron, where someone doesn't reach out to me and want to have a conversation about that podcast. And you'd be surprised at the people in Birmingham who come and sit in this office and talk about it, that have great businesses and great reputations. And you would never know that they're waking up every night in the middle of the night and absolutely obsessing and stressing over their business. So what I've learned is that's like totally normal and part of the journey. Thankfully now I can recognize the warning signs. And I had to get on medication. I had to go see a therapist. Like it was terrible. I don't want to gloss over that. It was terrible. But I understand now more than I ever have that my business doesn't define my life. And this whole thing could blow up and go away tomorrow and I'm going to be okay. But I had to learn that, man. These things are our babies. We pour our heart and soul into them. And I think that makes me a much healthier CEO, entrepreneur, operator now, to realize that I can really hold it with an open hand. So I don't want anybody to leave this interview and think, oh, Forrest has got it all together. I don't, man. I've been low. I've been where I couldn't get out of bed. I've been where I didn't want to walk into this building. And it's real. So if you're there, you might want to check out my podcast on that.
Look, I think every entrepreneur has certain phases they go through as that business grows. And the high times are so good. When I can still remember looking back to my early days, the first time we cleaned a home, the first time we sold a franchise, the first time we had $1 million store, all these first times. You know what, though? Almost every single time, the joy that comes from that next first time almost declines, it feels like, because as an entrepreneur, we're not, at least for me, I'm not really built for celebration. When I win, when I'm victorious, when we hit a milestone, I just go figure out the next one, and so that is sort of how I'm built. But I've also recognized that not everyone else is built that way. And so everyone in our organization needs to feel that way, and everyone needs to celebrate. And that includes me, even though I can admit that that's a little bit of my personality. When we're coming up on a really fun milestone, we're getting close to a $50 million milestone in our network at Two Maids and a Mop. We need to do something. I need to do something for myself, because I can remember our first year in operation, we did $100,000 in revenue. So $50 million is a pretty big deal when you did $100,000 in a year, So I think that probably could to help a lot of entrepreneurs, what you just shared with us, because I think most people who want to be entrepreneurs think successful entrepreneurs have it all together, that there's no imperfections, there's no depressions. It's all, Shark Tank Hollywood stuff. Yeah, absolutely. So anyone listening, there's some fun days and some fun rides and journeys you'll go through as you build that business. But recognize that the success that's coming, as great as it is, it creates its own pain. And sometimes that pain's good. It's good for you to go through some things as a person. But it's not all roses once you start growing. There's still just as much pain later on as there is early on. All right, so I've got some rapid fire questions for you if you're ready for these. These are just completely, I wrote some down, so they're not random for me, but they might be for you. So you actually kind of hit one early on, so we won't kind of talk about the one thing. I'm a big fan. Have you ever read the book, What the One Thing? So you kind of hit that early on about what's one thing you would do differently today if you could go backwards. I'd like to talk about hiring. You actually mentioned something about you were hiring these, early to mid 20s trainers to run your business. Here at Two Maids and Pink Zebra World, we're hiring blue collar employees. It's tough. It's been tough for a long time, but it's super tough right now in 21. How have you managed the hiring issues as you've grown? Has it been super challenging, or has it been very challenging, but you figured it out? Where are you now on the hiring side of things?
I would say challenging. We've definitely figured it out, but I mean, we had to, Ron. Our product is our people. We're not serving a cup of coffee or a great sandwich. We're serving a interaction and a life-changing delivery of a program of someone who may come in who've never touched a barbell, or someone who comes in and wants to compete at the highest level every day. And my coaches have to be completely adaptable to all personality types. And they also have to be super knowledgeable and passionate about fitness, but they can't be more passionate about their fitness than their customers' fitness. If I got a trainer and all they want to do is post, selfies and their amazing deadlift weight or their shirt off pics, they're not right for my brand. What I want is coaches who love people and are more excited that Ron hit his 20-pound weight loss goal than the fact that they just, crushed a PR on a bench press. And that's a fine balance. So from the beginning, we've used recruiters. We're constantly looking, but I think you have the tactical side and you have the strategic side. So real quickly, if you don't have your vision and your core values and your basically your ethos of who you are as an organization, it's impossible to find the right fit. So once you establish that and and it's well documented and codified, like this is who we are. These are our core values. This is our purpose. We create fitness communities that change lives. This is our mission. This is where we're going. And if you fit these three things, hey, you know what? One of our core values is that we're going to connect God's blessings with his purposes. What's that means, Ron, is we're probably going to start most meetings in prayer. And if that's uncomfortable to you, you're probably not going to fit in here. So what happens? Some people get repelled by that. And some people say, that's exactly where I want to be. So it starts there. You hire based on values. But then what I've really had to learn is you review based on values. Yes, you review on, okay, what is your role and are you executing your role? But how well are you living out these values? Because to the extent that you review or don't review your values is the extent that you're serious about them. Because what happens is if you don't do that, then you have B and C players on your team. The A players look at that and says, oh, that's just something we put on the wall. We're really not serious about that. And you deteriorate the strength of your culture. So all that has to be in place.
Right.
Then, I'm going to go tactical for a second. All right. So there's the strategic side. Tactical, I've learned you've got to automate it. Then you've got to put someone in charge of it. And so automated, we have a dedicated web page that puts people through the ringer that they have to do all these things, submit a video of them coaching, FedEx us a package of why they want to work for us, like all these things. Why? Because if they're not willing to do those things, then I don't want to hire them in the first place. Then I've got to have someone who owns that, who lives, breathes, sleeps Iron Tribe culture, hires, and then onboards. We use a tool called Culture Index. I've used all the personality profiles. I've used Colby, I've used DISC, I've used Enneagram. I love Culture Index. I won't go into it, but we use Culture Index and we know based on the prototypes of our most successful coaches who we're looking for and who will not be a good fit. So very early in the process, you take the Culture Index and it gives you a personality type that doesn't do well in our organization. We're done. And so anyway, there's all these tactical things, but I think at the end of the day, if I had to boil it down, is know your values, purpose, mission, and then always be recruiting. Recruit for your team as hard as you recruit for your clients. Right now, literally yesterday, I had someone start full-time. I have nowhere to put her. Why? Because when someone doesn't want to do the job or someone decides they're going to move or what, like I've got a bench. And so I'm willing to pay her full-time salary and fill in where I can use her for now to know that I have a bench. Because when you don't have a bench, that's when you settle. That's when you feel like they've got you by the cojones. You can't do anything about it. What am I going to do? Step in and coach all their clients? No, they know that, so they don't toe the line. So have a bench, always be recruiting, and put some money behind it.
Man, that's so good, Forrest. I mean, you could write a book on just what you just said right there. That was so phenomenal. And it actually resonates with me. In our world, we're very blue collar, obviously. And, what we do, anyone can do. In your case, there's some training, there's some education that's required. Physically, you need to be, a certain stamina level. In our case, you kind of just have to breathe to say you can clean a house or even move a truck. And so, it sometimes is easy to just hire someone that has 2 legs, 2 arms. And I know this is bigger than our 2 businesses. This, for a lot of industries, that's what people are doing. And I've always thought of it in this way. Maybe this is a kind of a dumbed down way to think about it. I'm assuming you didn't marry someone just because they said yes. There was a whole dating process. There was a whole, your values. There's all these different things you were looking for in a partner. Same way with me. I don't think people think of hiring an employee in that capacity, but if they did, I bet things would be a little bit different, And so sometimes you get in a crunch and you need 2 arms and 2 legs, and it's easy to just say, hire this person because of that. But you would never get in a crunch and just marry someone because they have 2 arms and 2 legs. So if you can think about hiring in that way, even though it's a little bit weird, it probably helps you hire the right type of personalities, in my opinion.
Yeah.
All right. So let's move on to some other things that I think would kind of be fun. So you're talking to either aspiring entrepreneurs in Birmingham or folks that have, started a business and are really trying to scale it and grow it like you have. If you were to talk to them and they were to ask, Forrest, do I have what it takes? Could you tell them what it means to be an entrepreneur? What type of traits are required to really pull this off?
Yeah, easily. First of all, I don't think there's any recipe for personality. I'm a big, huge introvert. One of my good friends, former partner Jim Cavall, is probably one of the biggest extroverts that you'll ever meet. He brings things to the table. I bring things to the table. But what I do think is intangible for both of us and for anyone who's going to be successful is, can you honor self-promises? Can you do what you say you're going to do when no one else is holding you accountable but you? Because here's the deal. When you're an employee, it's like driving a car. There's stop signs, there's stop lights, there's rules, there's cops, and you got to stay between the yellow lines, right? But when you're an entrepreneur, it's like being on the ocean, and you got a compass, and you can go anywhere. And all of a sudden, the only limits to where you want to go is how well can you read your instruments. And so with being an entrepreneur, like, no one's going to wake you up and say you got to be there at 8:00. No one's going to say you better develop a marketing campaign to hit next month so that you have clients the month after that. Like, you could put all that stuff off for a short amount of time until you crash and burn. But if you can't honor self-promises, man, do not be an entrepreneur, because it will be a rough and rocky ride. If you have to have someone ride your tail and make sure you show up and stand over your shoulder to get stuff done, then you need to stay in the employee seat. Your life will be much worse if you move into entrepreneurship. I think that's the only, some people call it grit. There's a whole book written on grit. Like, at the end of the day, do you do what you say you're going to do? That's it.
I like it. Couldn't have said it better. All right. So I've talked to a lot of people. I've read a lot of books. Sounds like you read a few books as well. So I've gotten all sorts of advice on how to build a business, how to make it perfect, how not to have all the mistakes that we've both incurred building our own businesses. So we've already said that no matter what you do, you're going to still make a few mistakes and hopefully learn from those mistakes, but you're going to encounter some hiccups. However, what's one piece of advice that you could give every entrepreneur watching this right now so that they could prevent at least one big critical mistake?
So right behind me on my wall is my award in 2004 as the top 40 under 40. I don't even remember how old I was. I was in my 20s. I know that. But that question was asked. And on that plaque from the Birmingham Business Journal, it says that nothing is ever as good as it seems, and nothing is ever as bad as it seems. And man, that advice is really amazing because, when I'm in the valley and I think the world's collapsing and I'm telling my wife we probably need to sell our house and like all this crazy stuff, she's like, what are you talking about? And yet when I'm on the hill and, we just had an amazing month in March and I'm thinking, oh, well, man, my boat's kind of 2 years old. Maybe I need to, you just these swings and this roller. There's a book called The Roller Coaster Entrepreneur. It's like that can happen in a day, and really stepping back and realizing, man, it's just never as bad as we spiral down and think it is. But on the flip side, it's rarely as good. And if you can kind of manage your emotional state through all that, it's really going to serve you. And
I love it. I love it.
Relationships, that's, but definitely business.
Well, we speak the same language. We've lived the same life, it sounds like. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about Birmingham. You've been here for a long time. You're raised in Birmingham area? Is that right?
Right.
Yeah. So I'm from Georgia. Moved into Birmingham. Followed my wife, and made this place my home in 2009. We had originally started in Florida, and fell in love with it, and have been in love with it ever since. And it's been a great community for us. When I talk to other people in the franchise community, for instance, across the U.S., more often than not, they ask me why Birmingham, and I tell them all these great things about it, and they go, "Huh, that's true." And it's been a great thing for us. We get great talent here. We are able to, when someone visits us from Denver, Colorado, to learn more about the franchise opportunity, we know they are very serious about the franchise opportunity because there's no beach to go to. There's no mountain to climb. It's Birmingham. And so on top of that, it's just a great place to raise a family, in my opinion. So what are your thoughts on the community itself, just the entrepreneurial spirit around Birmingham? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I'm a bit biased because I've lived nowhere else other than my 4 years at Auburn, God's country. But man, I love Birmingham. I love that our headquarters is in downtown Birmingham. I did that on purpose. I wanted to be connected to one of my gyms, because I never want to lose sight of what we do. I want to hear the weights dropping. I want to see people running across my window. But I love being in Birmingham. I love the growth. I mean, when I grew up, you didn't come downtown. And so to see the growth, and there's a Publix right down the road now. We love it. We also love the diversity, especially we live in Homewood, and there's great diversity. We have an adopted son from Ethiopia, so diversity is very important to us. That he has that as he grows up. I love the fact that we're conservative. I love that we're in a red state. I love, I am conservative. I am a Republican. And so I like that we're still, it's so interesting. Real quick, I have a good friend who lives in Maine. He's a trainer. He owns a gym. They've been shut down. They're still shut down. Like unbelievable. And he texted me the other day and he said, "Man, tell me about Birmingham." And I was like, "Why?" He said, "Well, looks like I'm going to have to move into a red state if I'm going to stay in this business."
That's a good point. Yeah.
He doesn't lean that way, but it's obvious. So anyway, that's completely political, but I love that we still have those roots. I love that we're in the Bible Belt. I love that there's still thriving churches, and we have amazing churches in this community. I mean, I could go on and on. I love it. And I remember 2001, when I opened my very first Fitness Together. What I bought the state of Alabama for was hilarious. And then he visited. And then I showed him Mountain Brook, and I showed him Vestavia, and I showed him Hoover. And we were sitting at Cern West and South Side, and he said, "Oh my gosh, I have undersold this state." And I'm like, well, yeah, that's why I didn't show it to you before I put a purchase price on it. So yeah, I mean, I love it.
We're bigger than football.
Yeah, that's right.
People don't know that, but we are. And it's a great place to raise a family. And it's been a great place for both of us to build a business. And I know there's somebody out there listening right now that is wondering the same thing. When you think about Birmingham and a business, maybe you're thinking about just opening a deli. In our case, Forrest and I were thinking about building a national brand. And oftentimes you think, is Birmingham big enough for that? And two people here that have done that can tell you it is. It's absolutely large enough, and it's actually the perfect place to build a national brand, in my opinion. So go Birmingham. All right, Forrest. Yeah.
Real quick. So I did an article maybe 2 years ago where I got Birmingham Business Journal and the Homewood Star to collaborate on an article of how many franchise brands have come out of downtown Homewood. And Ricky Express Oil Change, me, Iron Tribe, Urban Cookhouse, Zoe's, Jack's. There's another one I'm missing, but it's like at a little tiny Homewood, Alabama. So
right. I agree, man. All right, Forrest, this has been so much fun. I'd love for anybody that's watching this to have a chance to interact with you and to maybe even, have a workout with you. I probably need that myself. But what can they do? What can people do that are watching to connect with you and learn more about Iron Tribe?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you can go to our website, irontribefitness.com. We'll always offer a free session if you want to come in and check out what it's all about. If you want to follow me, I'm on both Facebook and Instagram at Forrest Walden. Probably the best place to kind of see behind the scenes and what's going on with me.
Well, you keep on doing your thing, Forrest. You keep growing. I'm over here on the back end on the home services side cheering you on. We're proud to be franchise neighbors with you guys.
Ron, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. Thank you.
See ya.